All right, so watercolors are done in layers, and watercolors typically come in tubes, and you pour them out or press them out into your palette and let them dry. And then you reconstitute them with water a little at a time. You guys already have the panned watercolors that you're going to be using, but you'll notice that I have the colors mixed in water, and that's what you're going to be using those little round palettes for. I almost never paint straight out of what we call the pan. Once in a while I will go straight out of a color, but it's rare. Most of the time I'm going to mix the color, because when you go straight out of the pan like this, it's really saturated, and it will often end up being kind of streaky when you paint with it. So I mix it, and if I want it to be darker, I just go back and forth between my color and my water, and I just keep mixing. Be aware that the color you have here, it's going to be much lighter when you paint it onto the paper. So I usually keep my sketchbook out so that I can sort of test colors. And I have my sketchbook over on this side that I'm using to check colors with. But the first technique I'm going to teach you is called a flat wash. And with a flat wash, you start at the top of your shape, and you'll notice I've got the tilt going. I'm using gravity. This board that is on here, this table, actually sits at an angle. So I've got this downward tilt. And I am going to start at the top of this calla lily petal with the lightest color that is in this part of the flower. And the very lightest color that's in it is this really pale yellow. And I always start from the top and I work my way down. And I try not to let my paintbrush dry at all. So I want to keep, you can kind of see where the color is a little bit heavier. There's a little bead of paint that sits right there. And as I paint, I want to keep that. I don't want to let that disappear from my drawing or my painting here as I work my way down the petal shape. I want to keep that bead all the way across. So I keep going back, and you see me reach over and get more paint on my paintbrush. Because if I let that dry, if I let that bead of paint disappear, then I will end up with something that is streaky, because the watercolor will dry relatively quick, and it'll leave a little bit of a dark line where you have overlapped when you went to get more paint. So I keep that bead going always, all the way down the shape of my petal. I don't go back up and try and repaint. I try to work pretty quick. It's very important when it comes to watercolor, because it is a water soluble and it is on paper. It will end up being very quick drying. And if I am not really paying attention, I will end up with streaks. And I don't want streaks unless I intentionally put them in there. When I get to the bottom of the shape, I don't know if this is going to show in here or not, but when I get to the bottom of the shape, I'm going to take my paintbrush and kind of get all of the liquid out of it, and I'm just going to go pick that bead up at the bottom of the shape, and that will take that little bead of paint off the bottom of the area. Now I want to let this dry, because this is the lightest color, and there are some stripes in this canna or calla lily that are kind of, well, they're this color. But there is an area right down here that is super dark, and it's got a kind of a soft edge, And I can use my colors here, and I'm mixing a green with some blue, and I'm putting a little bit of brown into it to get it nice and rich and dark, because I want to create kind of a shadow. It was really dark green. And I'm going to paint this area down in here with this. And you can see anytime you have two areas where it's wet, near wet, you get this bleed. And I want to control this just a little bit. So I've cleaned my paintbrush. And I'm going to go in here and kind of control the bleed here. I don't want it to be as marked as that is. So I'm just using a wet paintbrush, drying it a little bit on my paper towel. And this will take a layer or two to get it as dark as I want it. But there's a good first step for us.